Jin-Woo noticed something and nodded at Essel. Hold on a second, he said. Sel set down her big pack and started rummaging through it. She pulled out a ceramic bottle filled with some kind of drink. What's that for? Jin-Woo asked curiously. This is a special drink liked by the Garsh clan, Essel explained. If you take this to the meeting. Jin-Woo chuckled and called out, Shadow soldiers, come here. Instantly, dark figures popped up around them. Essel's eyes widened in shock. 3 soldiers dressed in black stood before them, their presence as powerful as that of high-ranking nobles. The man who had summoned them now held 2 daggers in his hands, their gleam catching the light. She couldn't believe her eyes. This was the same person she'd spoken to just moments ago. Yet now his energy felt sharp enough to cut through her skin. Aren't you going there to negotiate? Jin-Woo asked, his voice steady but laced with a hint of doubt. Is your family close to this Garsh clan? Atsil shook her head. No. Nobles have fought over ranks since we resided in the demon world, but they're not an unreasonable clan. Cod. Jin-Woo flashed her a quick grin. That's fine then. One exception was enough. Leveling up was just as important as getting the permit. Wait here, Jin-Woo said before darting off toward the castle with his soldiers. Ezel's eyes widened in surprise at how fast he vanished. Pup, please hold on, she called out belatedly, staring nervously toward the castle. Ansil gasped in horror as she watched the Garsh clan's castle burn. From a distance it looked like a giant black creature was breathing fire onto the castle walls, melting them instantly. The knights rushed out in panic, but shadowy soldiers cut them down one by one. Oh no, Ansil muttered, her voice trembling with fear. Someone shouted, "Bee!" and another screamed, "Gaza!" as chaos erupted around her. Castle Garsh was way stronger than Castle Radir, but it was crumbling helplessly. Ezel's heart raced as she thought about what could have happened if father hadn't given up the permit so easily. The castle in flames right now could have been Castle Radir instead. Thinking about it almost made her pass out. She felt lucky that things had gone well with Jin-Woo. Then came a loud crashing sound. A tower behind the castle walls collapsed. How could anyone stand up to monsters like these? Essel wiped sweat from her chin, grateful that her family had avoided this chaos. Meanwhile, important people from the Hunters Association of Japan and high-ranking government officials were all in one place. The meeting room felt stuffy as the president spoke softly. The people in Korea were super excited because they now had their 10th S-rank hunter. The senior government officials exchanged knowing glances, smirking slightly. Japan had more than 20 S-rank hunters, so 10 didn't seem like a big deal to them. But for Korea this was something to celebrate after all. They only had 8 S-rank hunters before this. One had moved to another country, and another had passed away in an accident. But today's meeting wasn't about making fun of Korea. If it were, people wouldn't look so serious. The defense minister sat with a scowl on his face. He growled. What does any of that have to do with why we're here? His gruff tone matched his sour expression. Jeju Island, located off the southern coast of Korea, had been overrun by some pretty fierce magic beasts after a dungeon raid went terribly wrong. These weren't just any ordinary creatures, they were intelligent, ant-like magic beasts known for their eerie organization and ability to multiply at lightning speed. The Japanese government couldn't help but smile at the situation, feeling rather smug about the trouble their neighbors were now facing. Things were about to get serious. The problem had now hit Japan too. Just yesterday, a tiny village vanished from the map, and everyone blamed an ant that probably flew in from Jeju Island. They couldn't ignore this anymore. The Prime Minister was super stressed about what to do next, so it was time to stop messing around and focus on solutions. After all, jobs were on the line. You could tell the Minister of Defense was really on edge. The president of the association kept going. Mistakes happen when people rush into things without thinking. He looked like someone with a lot of wisdom, thanks to his gray hair and wrinkles. Then he said, "But I think this is the right moment." Everyone in the room had been distracted before, but now all eyes were on him. The Minister of Defense sounded nervous as he replied. Do you have a solid plan in place? Let's just say it's the right move. As the room fell silent, as high-ranking government officials, including the defense minister and top leaders of the organization, leaned in to hear more. The president paused for a moment before continuing. If someone says a piece of land belongs to them, but can't even protect it, do you really consider them the owner? Silence filled the air like a challenge, leaving everyone waiting for what would come next. What was the president of the association really getting at? Given how Korea and Japan have been connected, this wasn't something they could brush off as just some crazy talk from an old guy, especially since the person who said those words was none other than the leader of Japan's Hunters Association. So what are you trying to say? A government official asked cautiously. The president looked around the room with total confidence. We're gonna clear Jeju Island of all those magic beasts. The room buzzed with whispers and gasps. Then he dropped another bombshell. And we're gonna make Jeju Island ours. Wow, take over Jeju Island. The leaders of Japan's Hunters Association seemed calm, like this was all part of the plan they'd already discussed. But top government officials were totally confused. What are you even talking about? They asked. Do you want to start a war with South Korea? They've been ready for a fight for over 60 years. The room filled with raised voices as the officials got more and more upset. They were stuck in a tough spot. No one knew how many of them would still have their jobs if they didn't come up with answers for the prime minister and the media fast. They had gone to the president of the Hunters Association for help. And what did he suggest? A race around Jeju Island. This crazy idea made the super busy government officials furious. They would have scolded Shijo Matsumoto, the association's president, for wasting their time if his hunter bodyguards hadn't been standing right there beside him. It's amazing how some people just don't change. Despite all the angry words thrown his way, President Matsumoto just smiled. This reaction was all part of a clever plan. President Matsumoto clicked his tongue in annoyance and stayed quiet for a moment before speaking again. I'm not saying we should go to war or try to take the island by force, he said. What? Someone burst out. Then what's your plan? Another person asked impatiently. Just tell us already, someone else urged. A sly grin spread across President Matsumoto's face as everyone waited on the edge of their seats for his next move. The room fell silent as President Matsumoto's cold, serious expression made everyone freeze. His words hung in the air. We need South Korea to hand over the island willingly. The way he said it left, no doubt, was dead serious. For the first time that day, the deputy prime minister, a man known for staying calm under pressure, finally spoke up. President Matsumoto. He was here as the prime minister's official representative and right-hand man. Anything he said today carried just as much weight as if the prime minister himself were speaking. What you just suggested, how do you plan to pull it off? The second in command of the Japanese government leaned in, clearly curious about President Matsumoto's idea. Were they finally ready to listen? President Matsumoto got serious. Korea isn't strong enough to handle an S-rank 8, he said. They couldn't 4 years ago when those giant ants first showed up, and they still can't now. The deputy prime minister nodded in agreement. Jeju Island is a big place. It covers about 2% of South Korea's land. Imagine a whole island overwhelmed by magical creatures. Jeju Island was in chaos. The government tried 3 times to control the beasts, but failed each time. People thought they'd given up on saving Jeju. Then someone suggested, what do you think they'd say if we sent our top Japanese hunters here? Word spread that some of these ants could even fly, and Korea was just as surprised. It wouldn't take long for the ants to spread from Jeju to the rest of Korea. Why would they say no? But then someone asked, you think they'll just give us Jeju? Because we helped. The deputy prime minister saw problems with this idea and spoke up respectfully. President Matsumoto went on, okay, let's say we help Korea deal with the ant problem on Jeju Island. Like you mentioned, he was totally sure that both Korean and Japanese hunters could handle getting rid of the ants. No one doubted that. But then he asked, what does we get out of this? Even though the ants had already caused damage in Japan, the ones on Jeju Island were still Korea's problem to fix. Japan couldn't afford to lose their top hunters to help Korea in a way would that happen. The deputy prime minister was great at crunching numbers for himself and Japan's benefit. Fair trade was his rule in politics. If Japan sent its hunters to Korea, they'd have to get something big in return, but even getting Jeju Island wouldn't make it worth it. His ideas matched perfectly with the president of the association, which is why he was so interested in the first place. President Matsumoto's ideas were about as realistic as catching a cloud. The deputy prime minister stopped caring right away. Suddenly, President Matsumoto burst out laughing. Whoever said we were really going to help Korea? He asked. The deputy prime minister looked confused. Was President Matsumoto joking around? He was about to tell him to focus when, wait a minute. His eyes suddenly lit up. President Matsumoto had said they would offer help, but he'd never promised they would step in. Are you? Someone asked hesitantly. Exactly, President Matsumoto replied with a casual nod. The look of shock on the Deputy Prime Minister's face told him that the man had figured out the real plan. You're going to leave the Korean hunters for the ants? The Deputy Prime Minister guessed, his voice trembling slightly. President Matsumoto had expected this reaction. After all, there was a reason people praised him as a clever leader. He glanced at the deputy with a satisfied smile spreading across his face. When Korea's best hunters agree to work with us, we'll let them go after the queen ant while our team pulls back. Korea had already tried 3 times without success. Who would have guessed that a 4th attempt would fail because of betrayal from Japan? But by then, it wouldn't matter anymore. It would all be over. The Deputy Prime Minister's voice trembled as he spoke. Are you kidding me? Korea's top hunters are basically done for, President Matsumoto said flatly. Once that gate on Jeju Island opened, their fate was sealed. They've been living on borrowed time ever since. What are you saying? It means South Korea is about to be left super vulnerable. If all their S-rank hunters are gone, and those flying ants make it to the mainland. Could they keep ignoring the ants? Sure, if it was just a couple of ants here and there, their groups might handle them. But as the numbers grew, the ants were multiplying so fast, that it could put all of Korea in danger. They'd probably have to beg other countries for help. The question was, who would even want to step in? China and Russia both had armies of hunters ready to defend their lands. They also had huge areas to protect from these dangerous creatures. Meanwhile, when the S-rank gate first opened in South Korea, the United States refused to lend a hand. North Korea wasn't going to step in either. They were even prepared to send their top S-rank hunters to invade Seoul. In the end, South Korea's only hope for help would be Japan. But if those flying ants started multiplying like crazy, Japan would have its own problems to deal with too. Korea would have no choice but to ask Japan for help. Japan could then get anything they wanted in return. The Koreans might even give up Jeju Island without a struggle if things went that far. Everything would happen just as the president had planned. And the Deputy Prime Minister got chills thinking about it. President Matsumoto was ready to send the nation's top hunters on a mission so dangerous it could mean their deaths. His risky plan might even destroy the country. Shigeo Matsumoto is as scary as a villain in a horror movie. The Deputy Prime Minister got goosebumps just thinking about how evil the plan was. But President Matsumoto wasn't finished. He kept going, making things even more intense. Jeju Island is just the start. Little by little, Korea would have to turn to Japan every time they needed S-rank hunters' help. It could even be possible for Japan to take over all of Korea without a single fight. President Matsumoto finished his long explanation, and the government officials finally let out a breath they'd been holding. At first they thought the president was a bit out there, but now everyone was hooked on every word he said. President Matsumoto's voice was calm and steady, but it cut through the silence like a knife. What do you think? Deputy Prime Minister, he asked. All eyes snapped to the deputy. He gulped. Whatever he said next would be huge, like life-changing huge. If he messed up, there'd be no going back. The Prime Minister trusted him completely, so his answer had to be spot on. He thought it over again and again in his head, until finally he looked up, ready to speak. The room was on edge, waiting to see what he'd do next. Jin-Woo was on a roll. Every time his shadow soldiers took down a demon knight in those castle battles, he got a flood of messages. Defeated another demon knight, 3,000 experience points here. 3,000 there. Then the big one. Defeating a demon noble handed him a whopping 4,500 experience points. With each victory, Jin-Woo was steadily leveling up, getting ready for the ultimate showdown on the highest floor. The battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was gearing up to take it head on. Whoa. Big rewards mean big risks. If Jin-Woo wanted the elixir of life, extra ability points, or that top-tier rune stone, he had to be ready for a serious challenge. He couldn't afford to slack off, not even for a second. When he heard the familiar ding of leveling up, he quickly checked his stats. Just a short time ago, he was level 80 when he entered the demon's castle for the second round. Now, after taking down most of the demons nearby, he'd soared all the way to level 87. Jin-Woo was grinning from ear to ear as he checked his boosted stats. Nice. He pumped his fist in excitement. You have defeated a demon noble. Ox. You have defeated a demon noble. Ox. The shadow soldiers quickly took care of the remaining demons, leaving no mess behind. It was a total win. Once the fight was over, The soldiers gathered around Jin-Woo, like they always did. Iron, being his usual self, was the first in line. Bump? Iron stood tall with his chest out, looking like he was waiting for Jin-Woo's approval. Jin-Woo grinned at Iron's massive frame blocking his view. "You all set?" he asked. Iron nodded. "Really sure?" Jin-Woo pressed, raising an eyebrow. Iron nodded again, this time with a firm jerk of his head. Jin-Woo cracked a smile and sharpened his focus. Spinning around like a top, he hurled Barca's dagger with lightning speed. Dagger throw! In the blink of an eye, the dagger streaked across the room and slammed into the wall, or so it seemed. Then came a loud yelp. Arg! Our demon, that had been hiding in stealth, waiting for Jin-Woo to wander away from his soldiers, now had the dagger lodged in its chest. If it were human, the blade would have pierced its heart. The demon stared at the weapon in disbelief, its eyes wide with shock. How did he know I was here? This guy must have seen through its stealth. Magic that even high-ranking nobles used. But wait, Jin-Woo was just a human. By the time the demon looked up from its wound, it froze in surprise. Jin-Woo was already standing right in front of it, a smirk still playing on his lips. The demon's eyes filled with fear. Jin-Woo pulled out Barca's dagger and used his powerful close-range attack, Fatal Strike. Shock? The demon, already weakened by the dagger, didn't stand a chance against such a strong hit. It collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Jin-Woo put Barca's dagger away and turned to Iron. "So, what do you have to say now?" he asked. Iron looked embarrassed. He scratched the back of his helmet and stared at the ground. Just then, Igris returned from deeper inside the castle, where he had been chasing down any remaining demons. But, something about him felt off. "What's going on?" Jin-Woo stared at Igris, his doubts quickly disappearing. As he approached Jin-Woo, Igris nervously dropped to one knee and bowed his head. That part was normal enough. But then came an unexpected electronic chimea sound that didn't belong in this moment. A message. It felt like something had popped into his mind. Jin-Woo's eyes widened as he read the strange alert. Knight rank Igris has requested permission to rank up. Would you like to promote him? A promotion. Jin-Woo quickly checked Igris's info after seeing that bizarre message. Igris LV, max knight rank. This soldier has reached the maximum possible level for his rank. Jin-Woo couldn't believe it. How did he end up with a knight who was already maxed out? With the monarchs okay, Jin-Woo could move up to the next rank. But wait, what was happening with his level? It used to be in the high 30s, but now it just said max. Instead of leveling up more, it looked like his soldiers could rank up once they hit a certain point. Maybe they'd get their promotions around levels 35 to 40 or so. Jin-Woo tried to figure out exactly where that cutoff might be. Considering his soldiers were mostly around level 20, reaching a higher level would be a big deal for them. They'd need his okay first too. No wonder Igris had seemed super desperate when he came to Jin-Woo. Igris kept his head bowed low, waiting quietly for Jin-Woo's decision. You could tell how determined Igris was, by the way he stood there, patiently hoping for his master's approval. Jin-Woo felt a sudden urge to reach out and pat Igris on the shoulders for how awesome he'd been so far. Honestly, Jin-Woo glanced at the system's message again. It read, "Would you like to promote him?" The words blinked slowly, as if waiting impatiently for his reply. Igris had been one of Jin-Woo's very first soldiers, and he had fought harder than anyone else. Why wouldn't he say yes? Without a second thought, Jin-Woo agreed to the system's offer. Right. Jin-Woo agreed. But honestly, did he really need a command word for something like this? Jin-Woo scrunched up his face, thinking it over again. When he summoned soldiers, he usually called them in big groups. This time, though, only Igris was getting promoted. It made sense why approving multiple promotions at once would be tricky, especially right in the middle of a battle. Jin-Woo thought about using a simple command word like permission granted. As soon as he said it, strange things started happening under Igris's feet. Black hands shot out of the shadows, screaming in agony, and grabbed at Igris everywhere. "What's going on?" Igris cried out in shock. Jin-Woo watched closely. At first it looked like Igris was being pulled into his shadow, but actually something else was happening. The black hands gripping Igris began to fade away, turning into a swirling dark mist around him. He sucked in every bit of it until it was gone. It looked like Igris had merged with the smoke completely. As the last wisps disappeared, something about Igris felt different. His energy seemed stronger, A sudden alert pinged in Jin-Woo's ear, making him grin from ear to ear. He quickly checked Igris's stats. Igris is now an elite knight. Jin-Woo whispered excitedly. Even though his level had reset, Igris was now as powerful as Fang, who used to be the boss of a tough A-rank dungeon, before joining Jin-Woo's team. Jin-Woo's heart raced as he realized something huge. Igris was now just as powerful as that terrifying creature Fang. Ba-dump. It turned out Jin-Woo had been right all along when he first became the Shadow Monarch. He wasn't the only one who could get stronger. He looked at his shadow soldiers one by one, and it hit him. His soldiers were getting better too. And then there was Igris, who was completely transformed after leveling up. This made Jin-Woo realize something even bigger. All of his soldiers could rank up. His mind was blown as he thought about what this meant for his team. Jin-Woo was hit by a big desire. He wanted to promote his entire army. But first he had to deal with his growing to-do list. As he checked out his troops with pride, Tank came running toward him. Tank was holding a demon's dead body in his mouth, and there was something weird about the way he moved. Jin-Woo stared at Tank in shock. Tank was rushing towards him with that same intense energy that Igris had just shown. What the? No way. You too. Tank flipped the lifeless body aside and dropped onto his stomach, stretching out his front paws toward Jin-Woo. Aru. He barked softly. Another message popped up with a ping. An elite rank shadow beast has requested permission to rank up. Would you like to promote him? Jin-Woo let out a deep breath and rubbed his forehead. He checked Tank's stats and sure enough, the big guy had maxed out his level 2. Shadow Beast. Maxed elite rank. This soldier has reached the maximum possible level for his rank. With the king or queen's okay, he could move up a rank. Wait a minute. Something didn't feel right. Igris had started at level 7 and was an unstoppable force on the battlefield. But Tank seemed like he still had a long way to go to reach max level. Yet somehow they had leveled up around the same time. Whoa, it's pretty surprising that the levels could balance out after just one battle. Maybe each rank needs different levels to level up. That would make sense. If Tank, being elite, can advance at a lower level, he'd hit the threshold much faster. But Igris, as a knight, might need a higher level to move up, taking him longer. It all clicks when you think about how ranks work. So, it was possible for them to level up at the same time by coincidence. Jin-Woo thought about this, and then another idea hit him. Maybe I'll rank up someday too. He probably just hadn't reached that point yet. Right? Like that's going to happen. Jin-Woo said with a laugh. Then he nodded and approved Tank's promotion. Permission granted. As soon as he said that, Tank went through the same glowing transformation as Igris had earlier. Hand shot out of his shadow and quickly turned into black smoke that got sucked into Tank. Whoosh! Just like with Igris, Tank had become way more powerful. An elite shadow beast has been promoted from elite rank to knight rank. But there was something different this time. Ping, ping, ping. Notifications started popping up one after another. You can now give names to shadow soldiers that are knight rank or higher. These names will stick until the shadows are released. Haas, please choose a name. Up until now, Tank had just been a nickname.